The crimson moon hung heavy over the Serengeti that October night in 1987, casting shadows that seemed to writhe and dance across the blood-stained earth. Rangers would later call it the night when nature herself recoiled in horror, when the ancient laws of the savanna were shattered by a violence so raw it left scars on the land that endure to this day. 80 hyenas, their laughter twisted into something darker than screams, faced 4 lions whose roars would echo through legend. This was not hunting. This was war. In the heart of Tanzania's most unforgiving wilderness, where drought had turned grasslands to dust and desperation into madness, 2 forces of nature prepared for a confrontation that would rewrite the balance of power forever. The Bloodmoon bore witness to what survivors would whisper about for decades, a battle so brutal that even vultures fled the sky. Tonight, we uncover the true story of the night that changed everything. The Maasai elders speak of omens that preceded the carnage. For 3 weeks before that cursed October evening, the wildlife had behaved strangely. Elephants abandoned their traditional migration routes, thundering past watering holes they had used for generations. Zebra herds scattered without warning, their panicked whinnying carrying across empty plains. Even the scavengers seemed restless, as if sensing the storm gathering on the horizon. The drought of 1987 had been merciless. Rivers that had flowed for millennia now lay cracked and empty, their bones bleached white under the relentless sun. Prey animals clustered around the few remaining water sources, creating a powder keg of competition and desperation. It was into this volatile landscape that our protagonists emerged, each side hardened by months of struggle, their instincts sharpened by hunger into weapons of pure survival. The hyena clan that would earn infamy that night was unlike any researchers had documented before. Led by a massive matriarch known as D to local Samu, meaning blood in Swahili, this coalition had grown through absorption and conquest. Smaller clans, broken by the drought, had either fled or been consumed by Damu's growing army. By late September, her forces numbered in the dozens, a writhing mass of spotted fur and crushing jaws that moved across the plains like a plague. What made this clan truly dangerous was not just their numbers, but their coordination. Unlike typical hyena behavior, where chaos often reigned during hunts, Damu's followers operated with military precision. Scouts ranged ahead of the main force, reporting back with a series of calls that resembled a crude but effective communication system. Flanking units swept wide during attacks, cutting off escape routes, while the main assault drove prey toward waiting ambushes. They had evolved beyond scavengers into something far more terrifying. Standing against this tide of spotted death were 4 lions whose names would become legend. Django, the patriarch, carried scars from 100 battles across his golden hide. His mane, darkened by age and dried blood, framed eyes that burned with the fury of a king who had never known defeat. Beside him stood his brothers, Mfalme and Simba, their bodies carved from muscle and determination. The 4th member of their coalition was Django's eldest son, Casey, a young male whose courage would soon be tested in fire. These 4 had ruled the Ngorongoro region with iron claws for nearly 3 years. Their territory stretched across 60 square kilometers a prime hunting ground, encompassing 3 major watering holes and the richest grazing areas in the region. No challenger had ever managed to hold ground against them for more than a single night. Hyenas who dared test their borders were met with swift and brutal retribution. The very mention of their roars sent rival prides fleeing into the darkness. But the drought changed everything. As water sources dwindled and prey became scarce, traditional boundaries meant nothing. Desperation drove predators into territories they would never have dared enter in better times. The collision between Damu's expanding clan and Django's shrinking kingdom was inevitable, written in the dust and sealed by the Bloodmoon rising overhead. The first encounters were merely skirmishes, testing the waters of conflict. In early October, Damu's scouts began appearing at the edges of lion territory, their distinctive whooping calls echoing through the night like mockery. Django responded with thunderous roars that shook the earth, warning them away from his domain. For several nights, this deadly dance continued, predator eyeing predator across invisible lines drawn in sand and marked by scent. The escalation began when hunger overrode caution. A young hyena, emboldened by the clan's growing numbers, attempted to steal a kill from Casey near the Olduvai watering hole. The confrontation was swift and decisive. Casey's powerful jaws crushed the intruder's skull with a single bite, leaving the body as a message for any who dared follow. But messages in the wild are written in blood, and blood demands blood in return. Damu's retaliation came at dawn. 20 hyenas surrounded Mfalmi as he drank at the river's edge, their laughter building to a crescendo that drowned out his roars of defiance. The attack lasted mere minutes, but when the dust settled, Mfalmi bore wounds that would never fully heal. More importantly, the psychological damage was done. For the first time in their reign, the lions had been forced to retreat from their own territory. Word of the encounter spread through the animal kingdom with the speed of wildfire. Elephants trumpeted the news across vast distances. Birds carried whispers from tree to tree. Even the insects seemed to buzz with nervous energy. The invincible lions had shown weakness, and in the Serengeti, weakness is blood in the water for every predator watching from the shadows. The hyenas grew bolder with each passing night. What began as probing attacks evolved into coordinated raids. They struck at dawn and dusk, using the changing light to mask their approach. Water holes became battlegrounds where neither side could drink in peace. The very air grew thick with tension, electric with the promise of violence yet to come. Django knew that retreat was not an option. To abandon their territory would mean death by 1,000 cuts, as they were forced into increasingly marginal lands. The pride's cubs would starve, their bloodline would end, and their legacy would crumble into dust. Sometimes a king must choose between certain death and probable death, and Django chose to fight. The lions began their own preparation for war. They abandoned their usual hunting patterns, conserving energy for the battles ahead. Territorial patrols intensified, with at least 2 males always moving together. They marked their boundaries with renewed aggression, leaving scent marks that reeked of challenge and defiance. Most importantly, they studied their enemies, learning the hyenas' patterns and weaknesses. As October wore on, both sides gathered intelligence like generals preparing for siege. The hyenas mapped every game trail and water source within lion territory, identifying choke points where they could mass their forces. The lions, meanwhile, studied their enemies' communication patterns, learning to distinguish between hunting calls and war cries. Each side knew that when the final confrontation came, there would be no quarter given and no mercy shown. The blood moon of October 23rd rose like an omen of doom, its crimson light transforming the familiar landscape into something alien and threatening. Shadows stretched longer than they should, and even the wind seemed to hold its breath. In the distance, the first hyena calls began to echo across the plains, building slowly from scattered voices into a unified chorus of hunger and rage. Django lifted his massive head towards the crimson orb hanging in the sky, his nostrils flaring as he caught the scent of his enemies massing in the darkness. The blood moon seemed to pulse with malevolent energy, casting everything in shades of rust and shadow. This was the night he had been preparing for, the moment when all debts would be settled in tooth and claw. The first wave of hyenas emerged from the northern ridge like specters materializing from nightmare. Their eyes gleamed like scattered embers in the moonlight, and their distinctive silhouettes moved with purpose that chilled even seasoned predators watching from safe distances. Damu led from the front, her massive frame dwarfing the others as she descended toward the acacia grove where the lions had made their stand. Behind her came the full force of her assembled army, 80 hyenas moving in formation, their spotted coats rippling like a sea of death. The sound they made was unlike anything the Serengeti had ever witnessed. Not the chaotic cacophony of a typical clan, but something organized and terrifying. Their calls synchronized into a rhythm that seemed to match the beating of some monstrous heart buried deep in the earth. Kessie was the first to spot the approaching horde, his young eyes sharper than his elders in the dim light. His roar of warning split the night air, alerting his pride to the magnitude of what they faced. Even he, with all his youthful courage, felt his blood turn to ice as he counted the shadows flowing down the hillside. This was no mere raid or territorial dispute. This was extermination. Django positioned his pride with the tactical awareness of a born warrior. The ancient baobab tree at their backs provided protection from rear attacks, while the open ground ahead would force the hyenas to charge across exposed terrain. Infalme took the left flank, his healing wound still visible but his spirit unbroken. Simba anchored the right, his powerful frame coiled like a spring ready to unleash devastation. Kessie remained close to his father, learning his final lessons in the art of war. The hyenas spread out as they approached, forming a crescent that threatened to engulf the lions entirely. Their strategy was simple but effective. Overwhelmed through sheer numbers, attack from multiple angles, and never give their prey a moment to recover. Damu had learned from watching countless hunts that even the mightiest predator could be brought down if enough teeth found their mark. The first clash erupted without warning. A young hyena, eager to prove himself to the matriarch, broke ranks and charged ahead of the main force. Django met him head-on with a blow that sent the attacker tumbling through the dust, his neck snapping with an audible crack. The body landed motionless at the base of the baobab, the first casualty of what would become a legendary slaughter. But that single death only seemed to enrage the approaching horde. Their calls rose to a fever pitch, drowning out even the roars of the lions. The ground trembled beneath the weight of 80 bodies moving in unison, and dust clouds rose like smoke from a battlefield already soaked in blood. The Bloodmoon seemed to burn brighter, as if feeding on the violence about to unfold. Damu herself led the main assault, her massive jaws snapping inches from Django's throat as he twisted away at the last possible moment. Her claws raked across his shoulder, drawing first blood and marking the beginning of the true battle. Around them, chaos erupted as the remaining hyenas crashed into the lion formation like a living tsunami of teeth and fury. Mfalme found himself surrounded by a dozen attackers, their coordinated assault designed to isolate him from his brothers. He spun and struck with desperate fury, his claws opening wounds across multiple enemies. But for every hyena he drove back, 2 more seemed to take its place. Blood streamed from a gash above his eye, blinding him on one side and forcing him to rely on sound and instinct. Simba's roar of rage echoed across the battlefield as 3 hyenas managed to drag him down, their combined weight overwhelming his strength. Teeth tore at his mane and flanks, seeking the vulnerable arteries that would end the fight quickly. Only his thick coat and powerful muscles kept him alive as he fought to regain his footing, his claws carving furrows in the earth as he struggled. Young Kezi proved his worth in those first terrible moments, his speed and agility allowing him to dart between larger opponents and strike at their exposed flanks. His youth worked both for and against him, giving him energy but lacking the experience to recognize the trap being laid around him. A group of older hyenas began herding him away from his father, seeking to isolate the youngest lion and eliminate him first. The battle raged with intensity that defied natural law. Bodies collided with bone-crushing force, sending combatants sprawling across the dusty ground. The air filled with the metallic scent of blood and the sounds of suffering that would haunt the dreams of any creature unlucky enough to witness the carnage. Even the insects fell silent, as if nature herself recoiled from the violence unfolding beneath the crimson moon. Django fought like a creature possessed, his years of experience allowing him to anticipate attacks and counter with devastating precision. His jaws clamped down on Damu's neck, seeking the killing bite that would end her reign of terror. But the massive matriarch twisted free at the cost of a chunk of flesh, her own blood now mixing with that of her fallen warriors. The hyena's numerical advantage began to tell as the minutes stretched into an eternity of violence. For every attacker the lions killed or wounded, more seemed to emerge from the shadows. Their coordinated assault never wavered, even as bodies began to pile around the base of the baobab tree. This was not the chaotic feeding frenzy typically associated with hyena behavior, but something far more sinister and organized. As the battle reached its crescendo, the Bloodmoon reached its zenith, bathing the entire scene in light the color of fresh wounds. The combatants moved like dancers in some macabre performance, their movements synchronized by the rhythm of death itself. Neither side showed any sign of retreat, locked in a struggle that could only end with the complete destruction of one force or the other. The tide of battle shifted like desert sand in a howling wind. What had begun as coordinated chaos now descended into something far more primitive and terrifying. Individual duels erupted within the larger melee, each combatant locked in personal struggles that would determine not just survival, but the future of their bloodlines. The crimson light above seemed to pulse with each heartbeat, each labored breath, each final cry that pierced the night air. Casey found himself driven further from his father's protective presence, the veteran hyenas executing their plan with ruthless efficiency. 6 of them formed a living wall between the young lion and his pride, their snapping jaws creating a barrier of death that grew wider with each passing moment. The youngster's inexperience showed as he lunged repeatedly at gaps that closed before he could reach them, his energy bleeding away like water through sand. Behind the wall of attackers, Damu herself stalked closer to her prize. The matriarch had learned patience through decades of survival, and she recognized the tactical value of removing the future generation before focusing on the present threat. Her massive frame moved with surprising stealth, using the chaos of battle as cover while she positioned herself for a killing strike. Django sensed the danger to his son through some primal connection that transcended the madness surrounding them. His roar of warning shattered the night, a sound so powerful it momentarily stunned even the most battle-hardened hyenas. But the distance between father and son had grown too great, the sea of enemies too deep to cross in time. The patriarch faced a choice that would haunt him for whatever remained of his life. Abandoning his own battle, Django hurled himself through the hyena ranks with the fury of a force of nature unleashed. His massive body crashed through their formations like a boulder rolling downhill, sending broken bodies spinning through the dust. Claws raked across spotted hides, teeth found throats, and his roar never ceased as he carved a bloody path toward his endangered offspring. The hyenas adapted quickly, recognizing the threat posed by the charging patriarch. Those not directly in his path began converging from the flanks, seeking to overwhelm him through sheer weight of numbers. Damu called out in their primitive language, redirecting the flow of battle to trap the Lion King in a killing circle of snapping jaws and razor claws. Infalme and Simba found themselves fighting back-to-back now, their wounds making every movement an agony, but their determination burning brighter than ever. The brothers had fought together for years, their coordination born from countless hunts and battles. Even surrounded and bleeding, they moved as one organism, striking and defending with synchronization that kept them alive against impossible odds. A young hyena made the mistake of approaching Simba's blind side, thinking the wounded lion would be easy prey. The attacker's confidence evaporated as Simba's powerful jaws closed around his spine, the crack of breaking bone audible even over the chaos of battle. The body fell twitching to the ground, joining the growing carpet of casualties that marked the fury of cornered lions. But numbers told their inexorable story. For every hyena that fell, the lions accumulated more wounds, moved a little slower, struck with slightly less force. Blood loss was beginning to affect their coordination, their legendary strength ebbing away drop by crimson drop. The hyenas sensed the shift, pressing their attacks with renewed vigor as they smelled victory in the copper-scented air. Kessie's desperate situation reached its breaking point as Damu finally made her move. The massive matriarch launched herself at the young lion's exposed flank, her weight and momentum designed to bring him crashing down where her followers could finish the kill. Time seemed to slow as her shadow fell across the battlefield, her jaws opening wide enough to crush bone and sinew with a single bite. The impact sent both combatants rolling through the dust, their bodies locked in a deadly embrace that would determine the future of the pride. Kessie's youth and speed battled against Damu's experience and raw power, neither giving ground in a struggle that embodied the entire conflict. Around them, the battle continued to rage, but this personal duel had become the focal point of the war. Django's arrival turned desperation into fury incarnate. The patriarch crashed into the melee surrounding his son with the force of an avalanche, his massive frame bowling over hyenas like scattered leaves. His roar of paternal rage echoed across the Serengeti, a sound so primal it seemed to shake the very foundations of the earth. Even the Bloodmoon appeared to flicker at the intensity of his wrath. The reunion of father and son created a brief island of hope in the sea of violence. Back to back, they formed a defensive partnership that combined Django's experience with Kessie's youthful energy. The young lion's mistakes were covered by his father's wisdom, while his speed complemented the patriarch's devastating power. Together, they began to push back against the encircling hyenas. Yet even as the lions fought with renewed determination, the arithmetic of battle remained unchanged. 80 attackers against 4 defenders, no matter how skilled or courageous, represented odds that defied even legendary prowess. Bodies continued to fall on both sides, but the hyena losses were replaceable while every lion wound brought them closer to extinction. The Bloodmoon began its descent toward the western horizon, but its crimson light seemed to intensify rather than fade. The battlefield had transformed into something from the deepest nightmares, where shadow and substance blurred together in a dance of death that had no choreographer save instinct and desperation. Steam rose from the warm blood, soaking into cool earth, creating an otherworldly mist that obscured vision and distorted sound. Damu recovered from her collision with Kessie, her massive frame bearing new wounds, but her determination undimmed. The matriarch had invested too much in this battle to accept anything less than total victory. Her clan had followed her into this war, and she would see it through to whatever end the night demanded. The taste of lion blood on her tongue only intensified her hunger for complete dominance. When dawn finally broke over the blood-soaked earth, the Serengeti held its breath. The crimson moon faded into memory, but the scars it witnessed would endure forever. Rangers found the battlefield littered with broken bodies, testament to a night when nature's balance teetered on the edge of chaos. The survivors, both lion and hyena, carried wounds that went deeper than flesh, marking them as veterans of a war that redefined the savanna's hierarchy. This was not just a battle between predators, but a reminder that even legends can bleed. If this tale of primal warfare moved you, share your thoughts below and subscribe for more forgotten stories from Africa's darkest nights.